Hey guys, it's Spence. I'm going to do something pretty cool tonight. It is about 10 o'clock at night and I got a little bit of time left before I'm completely out of gas. But I want to show you how our cool WordPress design system works. And I'm going to do that by taking a brand new WordPress installation here. This is just right out of the box with the 2012 default theme. And I'm going to turn it into something that looks like this. And I'm going to best of all do it right in front of your eyes, no holds barred, no secrets, no preparation. This is really live and unrehearsed. And the idea is that at First Web Designer, we are trying to make it so super easy for you to understand that WordPress is the best content management system upon which to build any of your freelance web designer setups for yourself or your client. And the reason is twofold. One is that the system itself has such an amazing back end that gives you dynamic content management and all kinds of plugins that are ready to upgrade to various features like e-commerce, etc. But the other reason is that the front end design can be so easily manipulated like Lego blocks in a way that can give you just about anything you want, but you don't have to worry about the underlying HTML and moving it to a server and blah, 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 blah. You can just get right into it with basically some CSS, some really basic HTML knowledge, and as I'll show you in a little bit, even a little jQuery and stuff if you want, but not necessary. So for tonight, because it's been quite a long day, I've had a nice day, but it's been a long day, I'm going to see how much I can do before the end of this video, and if necessary, I may continue it in a second video. Now, what's the goal of this? Well, we're building a couple sites here for you, our First Web Designer readers, and one of them is going to be a cool little site called 1WDNotes. And this is going to be just a random stream of consciousness site that myself, Danis, the rest of the team members can all post things that are interesting to us and that you can see them and share and comment on that aren't necessarily directly related to firstwebdesigner.com, right? So that's about how we're going to go. How are we going to get started? Well, let's do the basics. First of all, we're going to need one of the tools in our toolkit, which is Firebug. And I just turn it on here. And if you didn't see my video from the other day, Firebug is one of the tools. You can, if you want, also use built-in web developer tools or any other things that allow you to see into the code, into the DOM structure, as we're going to need in a minute. I'm using Firebug just because I like it and it's pretty easy. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the back end and we need to install the basis of what we're going to build upon. And in this case, just like I'm going to show you in a lot of other videos, I'm going to choose to use responsive. Now, the responsive theme by Emil Uzelac is, I think, still probably will continue to be the #1 most popular theme in the WordPress repository. It's free, and the reason it's so great is really, I think, a few reasons, but the biggest is that it's built as well as any theme ever, as well as any commercial theme ever, and Emil is on the theme review team for WordPress, or I should say for Automatic. So he really knows what he's doing, and he maintains the most incredible updates and customer support. So even though we're going to help you directly, we have a nice relationship with Emil, and this is a theme that I can 100% guarantee you. We're going to show you how to twist it and turn it in all kinds of ways in future videos to make it look like different things, and it's just a great basis. So enough ranting and raving. Let's go ahead. We're going to go to Appearance, Themes. Now, I should mention too, if you've never installed WordPress before, I've got another video over there at, well, you can probably pick it up at 1WD.tv where we have it, but it's the basic idea of how to install WordPress. So if you haven't seen it, go back, but I think most of you know how to get to the basic WordPress. So from here, we're going to go into the dashboard under Appearance Themes, and let's install Responsive fresh from the repository. So we click on Install Themes, I'm going to type in Responsive. We're going to pick up this latest copy. It's, again, from Emil Uzelac. And we're going to install it now. By the way, I just want to show you this because it's worth mentioning. We're on version 1.87. There's going to be a new version coming out that's got some further improvements. Nothing will change about what we're doing, but it's always nice to check which one we're at for this video, just in case you're looking at this down the road. Okay, so we install the parent. But here's the thing. Even though I could go ahead and start working with the parent, and there's places in the theme that I could add my CSS, we want to use a method called child theming. Now, what child themes do are basically just like with human beings. If I'm a human being and I want to improve myself, I can go get surgery and do all kinds of crazy stuff to my body, but you know, I only have so much longer to live. So if I made some improvements, that's not going to pass my improvements to the next generation. And so I'd rather have a child. And the child can have the improvements, and then that child can continue on when I'm gone. Well, in the same way, if we make modifications to our parent theme, and then the parent theme has an update, we're going to have some real problems because the update would overwrite the old parent. And so instead we create a child theme which allows us to add whatever customization we want to a secondary theme that WordPress allows to have sort of a DNA attachment to the parent, so it knows how to do all the same stuff, but there's no risk of losing any of those customizations in the event that the parent is updated. So it's a quick explanation. I've got a longer video elsewhere, but let's just show you how it works. So we're not actually going to activate anything. We're going to go back now that we've got the parent, and we're going to go ahead and upload the child. Now, the child theme is something we'll provide for you. We've put together a special child theme just for responsive that lets us do a bunch of cool stuff. But I'm going to show you all the nitty-gritty details, but I first must upload it. So I go over here to upload, and I click browse, and I've got a copy here on my desktop. I'm just going to use that. And it's a zip file. So we're going to upload it now. And the child theme is what we're going to activate. And you can see here, we call this responsive lab zip. This is our version 1.9. Don't worry that the child is a different version than the parent, because remember, just like in life, the parent is never far from the child. But the child is what we're actively working on. All right. Now, this has some other features in it, so we're not going to use them right now, such as WooCommerce and BuddyPress. Those are things you could use for a store or for social networking or for forums. We're going to hide these notices so they don't show up again. And now we're going to go and show you the essence of what's going on with the child theme so that you understand what we're going to modify. Now, I happen to use a standalone editor. As I talked about in a previous video, you can use any editor that floats your boat. I just happen to be using a copy of Transmit here along with Smoltron. So Transmit is the FTP program. Like I said, you can use in FileZilla or CyberDuck, anything that works for you. And then what I'm going to do is show you here, this is the WordPress root directory for my install, and this site is 1WDNotes. What I want to show you is if I go under WP Content and under Themes, this is where our themes are located now. And you can see we've got two themes by default, which is 2012 and 2011. Then we've got that parent, and then here is the child theme. Now, I'm going to break this down in other videos to show you how we can make a child theme from scratch, etc., etc. But for tonight, I'm just going to show you how we make this thing look like something else. So all you need to know right now is that when I work on this child theme, I'm going to make some modifications. And in our LabZip, in our responsive LabZip child theme, we've got a special CSS style sheet that overrides everything else. And it's called LabZip Custom. And again, I'll talk more about this whole thing later. It's a really cool little system. But I'm just going to open this up because this is where I'm going to make these CSS modifications. And just to keep this in the frame of the video, I'm going to sort of scale this up here a little bit. And that way, as I work on this, we can kind of keep our windows together. Okay, so I'm going to layer this all. Let's start having some fun. All right, what's the first thing we got to do? Well, let's take a look at the site now that we've turned on responsive and see what we have to start with. So when I refresh the page, I'm going to have a sip of tea here. You can see this is kind of what responsive looks like out of the box. Now, there's some structure to this that we're going to have to tweak a little because right out of the bat, responsive, again, being responsive design, has a wrapper. And the wrapper, I'm going to show you in a second, I'm very familiar with it, has effectively an even amount of space on either side of it. But as you can see in our prototype design here, we need to do something about the header going all the way across, right? Because unlike our stock responsive, the body wrapper is not proportional here. All right, so how are we going to do that? Well, let's go ahead and use our good friend, Firebug. I'm going to turn it on. And let's inspect the structure here. When I break this down, I'll give you a little more space here. There we go. Grab my handle. You can see here what's going on, that we've got our body. Well, let me say it another way. We've got our head and our body. Then in our body, here's where the issue lies. You see this container, and see when I roll my mouse over it that those purple lines for the container go all the way to the top. And if we looked over to the right, after selecting container, we can see that the container div is 960 pixels maximum width. And it has a padding on the sides of 25 pixels. Now that's awesome, but we're going to have to do something else. So the way I'm going to handle this is basically I'm going to take the header, this section here, and I'm going to remove it from that container. And I'm just going to move it above the container so that I can force it to go full width. Okay, does that make sense? Now if I wanted to, I could actually even make that better by putting a pseudo container or an additional container for the header section. I should use the word actually an additional wrapper, but I wanted to make you understand that I'm talking about the same stuff in the container. I just need to move the header part up. And in order to preserve that, maybe I'll just make a new container. So how are we going to do that? Pretty easy. If you've been working with HTML and Dreamweaver, all that stuff, this should be pretty old hat. But what we're going to do is head on over to our responsive LabZip child. And you'll notice here that we've already got a header PHP file. And this is something that we took from the parent theme because a lot of the mods that people need to make will involve this file. Now the coolest part about working with WordPress is that if you have a child theme and you duplicate any of the files from the parent, for example, here's the parent, if I duplicate the header PHP file and I move it over to the child theme, which is responsive LabZip, it will override the parent's respective file. You understand what I mean? So basically, the first and most important thing of child theming is it's great because even if I modify this copy of header PHP in the child theme, my modifications are safe, but everything about this will override the parent. So it's super powerful. Let's open it up. And forgive me if I have to keep taking a sip of tea here, but it's late. It's been a long day of talking. Tea. Okay, so what are we going to do? We had to change the structure of this setup, right? And so what we're looking for is, what we talked about here, we're looking for the container, specifically the header. Now I'll do a search for it. So let's do this. We'll search for container. We can see here, oops, that's not what we're looking for. Okay, we can see we found it now. It's on line 44, and it's right here. Okay, the division ID is container, and you'll notice there's actually a little hook above it. Now, hooks are something oh so cool in WordPress, and they're just like code hooks. They're little places that are in the theme that the author has made so that in the future we can actually just use functions to change or add things without having to go in and hard code stuff. But remember, because we're not modifying the parent, the alternative way is to restructure the child theme, and in that way we don't necessarily have to rely exclusively on hooks. All right, so remember we just talked about the idea that we need to get rid of the header, which is right below it, and bring it up and out. Okay, so we're going to take everything from within the container section, and we're going to look for the end of the container section. We're going to move it up. So let's see if we can find that. And here we go. I want to check one thing while I'm doing this. I want to look to see the container's there, the wrapper's there. So let's look for the end of the wrapper because I'm looking to see here and I may be a little bit tired, but the end of the wrapper is here. And I think the end of the container is elsewhere. So I'm going to take a chance and I'm simply going to grab everything that is not in the wrapper. I'm going to grab everything that's just in the header division. Okay, so I'm going to go from the hook that's after the header up to the beginning of the header. Okay, so where the header and the header hook start down to the end of the header and the header hook. And I'm going to Control X. I'm going to cut it. Next, I'm going to go right above the original container and I'm going to make a new division. So division ID equals, and I'm going to call this something else. So I'm going to call it header container. And the reason I can call it that is because I'm pretty sure working with this that that's not otherwise in use. If I wasn't sure of that, I should use something that is personal to me as the designer that is still relevant. For example, I might call it lab header or something. since I'm pretty safe in knowing that it's not going to conflict with anything, I'm going to use that. And I've got a beginning and an end. And now what I'm going to do is paste in the code that I had just copied that includes the header end all the way up to the header beginning. Right to here. Okay. And if I needed to do so, I could always make a little note for myself, such as this is where I added a custom header container. And I'm using standard PHP commenting here, just so that, maybe give myself a little bookmark. All right. Now I'm going to save that, and let's see what happens. And I can tell you what is going to happen. More likely than not, is it's going to be up there, but it's just going to fall off to the left side, I bet. Because now we're outside of the container. You see? There's nothing holding it in to the left and the right sides. So how are we going to fix that? Well, let's borrow the styling from the original wrapper, but only for the stuff that's important. For example, only for the stuff about the logo and the menu. Now let's refer to our model. If I was to modify this, and by the way, I've got a little thing here where I drag an image in so I can always resize this for the video. But if I was to resize this, it's probably going to move the stuff around. In fact, let me do something else. Let me just open up another browser here, like Google Chrome. I'm going to resize this so I don't have to mess up our video window. I'm just going to copy this model to there. Okay. So let's see what happens if I move this around. This is responsive, and although we may not get there tonight with this part of it, I want you to see something that you see how the logo is moving around and all that stuff. And we're going to try to come pretty close to that. But for the sake of argument, the most important thing I'm seeing is that the logo and the top stuff pretty much stay hard to the left. So for this purpose, I think all we need to do is actually just offset a little bit. So in our actual working site, what we need to do is basically offset this a little bit so that we have a similar result of, I'd say it's about 5 to 10% from the left side. Now actually, if I want to, I can cheat a little bit and I can spec this with Firebug. And I kind of take a look at what they've got going on here. So if I look at this header, I can see that the logo has a float to the left, and it has a margin of top, right, bottom, left, a left margin of 38 pixels. So I can actually cheat even more and copy that. And let's go on over to our side. And we don't have the right logo in yet. We'll do that in a second. But let's go ahead and see our logo right now has a margin to the left of 38 pixels. But I think we're missing something. And I think what we're missing is the fact that the header is right now not doing anything to hold the guts in. So let's try that again. There we go. Okay. So I take it back. What had happened was I hadn't actually hit the inspect button again, so I was looking at the old CSS. So let's go ahead and apply the same logic to our logo. We've got a float left, and we're going to say margin. We're going to pop that in, and you notice immediately our left margin moves over. And then let's also deal with the menu. Well, we're not going to need that menu because at the end of the day, we're going to have this vertical menu. So what I can do is a couple things. First idea is this is one of 4 menus that come default with responsive. If I simply turn it off and stop using it, that would be a good way to do it because ultimately speaking, I may not need to do anything in this design. Alternatively, I could leave it in place but repurpose it later and make it vertical. And that's probably a better way to go because I can see here that it'd be handy to have a dynamic menu that I could continue to update and change. Although this design may be otherwise hard-coded. I'm going to play that option out later. So for right now, I'm going to go ahead on the left-hand side and try to figure out where that menu is. And it's right here. So 2 ways I can get rid of this. The easy way is if I go in the back end under Appearance Menus. Let me close Firebug so you can see that a little better. I first of all know that once I create at least one menu, I'll have 4 places that there are options to use it. So I'm going to call this Header Menu, and there's a reason for that. Having worked with this theme, I know here are the 4 locations that menus can exist: on the top, in the header area, subheader area, and footer. If I select this blank menu with no items in it for the header, it's going to work for right now to basically remove that from our display. So let's reload it. And by the way, this is going to jump back. And that works pretty good. Second thing I'm going to do too is I'm on the default page here, and this is just a little tiny bit distracting. So let's go and create a blank page that I can just look at. So I have something to gauge this whole layout again. So I'm going to call this just layout page. It doesn't have to be called anything. And I'll stick with the default template for right now. And I'm going to go ahead under appearance. I'm going to go under settings, reading, and I'm going to go ahead and make the page I just created to be the default so that I can look at that when I'm doing the rest of the design. Okay, now, obviously that wasn't incredibly helpful, but we'll get by. And I see something here. We've got something that we need to turn off for a second, so that's okay. Let's go ahead and suppress that. We're missing a plugin, which is BB Prowse. I'm just going to install it in here to get rid of the warning message for a second because it's looking for the plugin. Okay, fantastic. All right, so getting back to where I was, I refresh the page. All right, so now let's go ahead and kind of pick up where I was a minute ago. Let's go fix that logo thing again. And inspect it by right-clicking on the logo. There we go. And if you remember, I had sort of cheated a little and taken it from this side. Okay, now what we want to do though is we're going to start adding this to our permanent custom style sheet. So I right-click on the rule declaration and I copy it. I go back over to my LabZip-custom CSS style sheet because this is where I'm going to save any of the modifications I make. And this will make them permanent so they'll stick. So when I save that and refresh, now I've got the ability for this to stick, and now we're going to start making some progress. The next thing I want to do is try to identify what the height and width of this header area is, or the new header container, so that I can make some progress, right? And the first and easiest way to do that is just simply add a border. But in order for this to actually have some volume to it, I may actually have to use the display attribute of block. So let's see what happens. First of all, I'm going to put a border on just to see it. And this is a good tip for anybody. If I am looking to see how layouts work, I usually use a 1 pixel solid red. And I can see right away, the logo by itself isn't going to cut it. So we're going to have to go up to the header, and let's see the same thing. So let's do border 1 pixel solid blue. And aha, okay, well, it's up there, but it's obviously not filling out the space. So I'm going to have to do overflow hidden. Aha, now we're seeing some action. You see how now when I did overflow hidden, that the header division was able to now extend down around the stuff inside of it. Okay. And for right now, that's actually a good model because I'm going to copy this so I don't lose it. Move it over to my style sheet. I'm going to save that for a second. So now we're getting closer to where we want to be. I think to help us a little bit, we should actually put in the web designer logo. Well, I can do it a couple ways. I can hard code it into the theme, which should be easy. But WordPress is much better for that kind of stuff. It's already got the ability to manage your logo. And what if we want to change that? I mean, maybe we're going to make it 1WDNotes or something, or put a picture of the team up there. Okay, so let's go over here instead in using the built-in WordPress feature that allows us to add header stuff. We're going to go Appearance Header. I'm going to choose a new image. I'm going to browse, go back to that folder where I had already gotten that logo file, the logo PNG, and I'm going to upload it. And here we've got the built-in capability to crop it. So I just drag the handles over, and then I'm going to publish it, crop and publish. And then I'll save this because I can see it's already selected. Now when I refresh my page, okay, now we're getting close. Well, obviously we still have to do some changes to this header, all right? And the obvious one is that that thing should be a little more centered vertically, and also we need a black background. I'm pretty sure it's black, but let's double check. We're going to right-click, inspect it, and it's not actually pure black, it's 222. So the hexadecimal color 222, let's go and do the same stuff. Right click on our new container. Make sure we're in the higher header container. And actually we got a debate. The header container or the header, either one will work because the way this is laying out, it's filling in the whole space. So actually I'm going to leave the header container as sort of a placeholder and not add any style to it. And instead, since I've already got some style to the inner container, the header itself, I'm going to modify that. So here I'm going to say, whoops, wrong one. I'm going to click, tab, I'm going to say background, and then I'm going to add in that same stuff from the first web designer site. And once again, I'm going to copy that over to my style sheet, overriding the first changes. And now I can get rid of that border because I don't need it anymore because the black is going to hold the spot. Okay, now we got to do a couple other things. We got to change the spacing of the height. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that, and sometimes it has to do with the content itself. For example, one way to do it is you can have padding above and below a content element, or another way is to have it where, for example, you have a line height that's specified of a minimum height, and that does the same thing. Let's see how they did it here. If I roll my mouse over, I can see first of all that there's definitely some big margin in here. So we've got top margin 34 pixels. Let's see what else we got. The image itself has nothing. It's just the hrefs logo link that's actually doing that. Let's see about the other stuff. Well, you know what? I see there's a consistency. There's a margin top of 28. So the way they did this layout is basically they put margins on the various elements to push them down from the bottom. The only question I have is what did they do about spacing at the bottom of the stuff? And I'm not really seeing a lot there, so perhaps it's just a factor of, we got a minimum height variable here, or attribute. He said the minimum height is 100 pixels. So let's try that to start for us, and then see how it works out with the other elements inside of it. So again, if I look at the header, let's say we do minimum height 100 pixels. Hey, not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. Okay, we're going to stick with that. Copy the rule declaration. Override the stuff we've already got in there. It's time for some tea. I'm not 100% where we started this video, so I'm just going to keep going until I run out of voice or till I put some of you folks to sleep. Hopefully you're following along with me though, because what I want to at least do for this video is give you a real flavor for how easy it is to manipulate this stuff, especially when you've got a model, and then show you that our layout is ready for the fine details, which I can do maybe when I'm a little more fresh. Okay, so let's keep working through. I'm not going to worry about these little nuances here because we can add those in later. Now let's worry about the other main content area stuff. We've got something kind of weird or tricky going on because you saw there's responsiveness, but I noticed that we've got this interesting sort of floating content area in the middle. And then we've got this really interesting left menu and navigation, and then we got the sidebar. Now, I may not get it exactly right, but I'm going to start with the low-hanging fruit by doing the footer first. So let's look at our footer. We can see, well, there's nothing there. So this should be easy, but we might have to do the similar kind of a trick, to see if it goes full width, because when I go to my existing footer, yes, it is true, we've got the same exact issue, where it's inside of a limiting width of 960 pixels. But here we've got something better, I think, that will save us. You see where the container ends and then the footer begins? Well, since the footer itself is not inside of the container, I think here we have an easier time of it. Because if we were to remove that, we can cheat the system. We can just go ahead and make the footer any width we want without having to move the actual elements into a new place in the footer PHP. So what I'm going to do here is make this easier to see by first putting, remember, a border, a false border, just so I can see it. 1 pixel, solid. Let's do green. I like green. There you go. Nah, that's hard to see. Okay, let's go back to red. And let's remove the max width. All right, now, here's the problem. If I have the original style sheet of the parent and it's got an attribute, and I then don't use that, unfortunately that attribute will still carry forward. So I can't just simply avoid using it. I have to go and use a different way to override it. All right. So the way I can do it here is a couple ways. First of all, if I use the attribute of inherit, it gets rid of the default parent, but also allows me to basically put something else in there or avoid putting something else in there. That's not a great explanation, but I'm a little tired. But let's just say it like this. If there is a numerical figure in there in the parent, the first way to try to override it with the child is to use inherit. And it will work most of the time. And otherwise, if we had a specific width we'd put in there, that would be fine too. But I don't think that we've got that. Right now, we want this to go 100%. So to make sure that that happens, I'm going to put in width 100%. Now, we may have to tweak that a little bit when we go into the responsive stuff. But for right now, this should be a pretty safe bet that, we're going to be fine. Now, I'm going to check one thing, though, before I finalize that last statement. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. I want to check and see what they've done here in their footer. I'm going to look over the footer. And I am not seeing anything here that says that they've got a maximum value. So now I'm going to just look at their container. And their container here has a width of 100%. And it has a minimum width, but not a maximum. So unlike some static designs that might say our width is 1140 pixels, etc., they're just basically saying, no, it just fills the whole page. And it has a minimum, when we get down to the smaller responsive size, but that's it. So I think I made the right decision. Next is, let's look at the color scheme. So it's looking like it's white, but I've been fooled before. So let's check it out. And actually, I'm right. The background is white. It's got a border top of DDD, and then it's got a font color of this. Now, I can save some time here. Watch this. If I just copy the rule definition from their site, their mockup, and I go over to here, I'm just going to put this right below what I was working on. And now I just do this. I'm just lazy. But that's how it's cool, because with WordPress and this system, you don't have to reinvent every wheel. Now, I can compare some of these elements. I've got the border, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And I see that there's clear both, so I can get rid of that. Margin, they don't have, so I got to keep that. Max width, I need. Padding, again, there's a difference on the padding, but I'm going to play with that in a second. So for right now, I've got 0 and 25, and I think what I'm going to do is actually take this out. So I'm going to go with theirs. Width 100%, which we're going to keep for right now. And then we've got this other background stuff. So let's take a look by merging those things and see what the results are. Right click, refresh the page, and it's looking pretty good. I can see a few problems though. And the few problems are that obviously the content is kind of off to the right and left a little bit, right? So let's see how far they've gotten in. Well, looks to me like they did something a little more unusual. Maybe they limited this. So let's check it against Firebug. And there is an inside class, right? And it's got a left-hand margin of 19%. And it looks like it's only left margin. That's what this yellow space is. You see, that's showing the margins. And I don't see a margin on the right side. So he's just sort of stood it off to the left. So let's see what we can do here to kind of duplicate that idea. If I go to the footer, inside is the footer wrapper. Now, once again, I can't see the footer wrapper, so that means that it's not really doing much as far as styling. It's just got some margin and padding. There is another class inside of it, though, that for better or worse, we might be able to use, but we might also have to abandon. So let's start with the idea of the footer wrapper. If this is normally going to the left and the footer wrapper is 0, let's see what happens if we do a margin left. So remember, the first number of every margin, if we're using all four, top right, bottom left is top, then it's right, then it's bottom, then it's left. And I think it was 19%. Interesting. That might work. Okay. So I think we can try that. Let's copy that. And again, if you want to be neat, you can put it in a certain order. I like to put it where, it goes alphabetically if that works. But in the meantime, while I'm designing, I just keep adding to the bottom. Because remember, when you're using CSS, the rules lower down on the style sheet will take precedent over the ones at the top if they're otherwise related to the same particular elements. Now, the next thing is, we're close, but this is unfortunately a little too big. And the reason is because it's got a class that's set up to be full width of 100%. And that's going to not work. You know, if I remove that, it obviously shrinks all the way. So let's see if they have something that shows how wide this inner part is. And that's not doing it. Aha, there we go. Well, in this design, I don't think it's so much that they limited the container, but they just have only so much content. And so the content is kind of setting the design. And that's okay, but that's not going to give us a lot of safety. So instead, what we might want to do is just, let's say, adjust the width of this. All right. So we could say a max width that will keep this 100% from being a problem. So if I say max width, let's just experiment. 500 pixels. Well, I think we can do better than that. Let's try 600, 700. I can rebuild it. Aha, we're getting warm. 900. We can even go a little bit more. Let's say 1,000. Not so much. Maybe we got to come back a little bit. Maybe about 960, huh? What do you think? That's not bad. Now, we got the copyright in the wrong spot in a couple things, but we'll worry about those later. So right now, I'm going to say that this actually worked out pretty good. By limiting this class for the grid 940 to something else, we're okay. But the problem we have is that if I go ahead and do that, this is a class that applies to the whole site, right? So I got to be careful because this is being used by a lot of stuff. So a better way for me to do this is going to be to modify the structure of the footer PHP so that I effectively change what class this area is using or this division is using. Now, there's other ways to do it. For example, I could use CSS just to limit it. In fact, maybe I'll do that to start. But the alternative or fallback, because we have a child theme, is we can always modify the child theme. So let me do it with CSS only. The way we're going to keep this to apply only in this case is that we have to add the parents to further limit it. So if I go one step up, I have the division ID footer wrapper. So I'm going to have to use that and then say footer wrapper with the division class of column 940. Okay, so copy this rule, go back to my style sheet, and I'm going to paste that in, but now I got to add that parent above it. So division ID footer wrapper. And that's going to say only in the footer where we have the column 940 should that be a different max width. When I refresh it, let's see if that sticks. So far, so good. I need a little more T. And we're getting close to this sort of shape and look of our whole layout. Okay, now that we've got that, and I'm not going to worry about the content because we'll come back to that. Let's go for the body. And I'm going to open that Firebug a bit. It's kind of looking good. We're getting really close. So I can look at this like how wide is the sidebar, how wide is the content. And I'm going to worry about this later. So for right now, I'm going to have the content area over here be just your white space. And on the right side is going to be the native background. And in order to do that, I'm going to layer the content with the color. And the background is going to be the native. So let's double check what color we've got here. And it seems that there's no color here, so we got to go up a bit. No color there. We keep going up maybe to the body. And there we go. So the body has a background of F6, F6, F6. Let's see what we've got here. We've got a similar situation, except ours is EF, EF. So let's make that the same to start. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Now my personal preference is that, again, if I can do alphabetical, great. But for right now, I'm going to do it in order. And I always like to only add the attributes that I'm changing so that later down the road, if I'm not really sure what I did, if I refer back here, I know that I wasn't changing a bunch of other things. This is the thing I changed. Okay, next, we've got to deal with this container being white. And again, forget about the menu for a second. And the way we're going to do that is let's double check if it's white. I'm pretty sure it is. Main. I'm not seeing a color, so let's go up a little. Fluid, nav. See, it's interesting. Sometimes I don't see it, so I gotta go down, and there we go. Background, it is white. Always be sure to check up or down until you see what's affecting the color. Okay, so for our case, let's go into the container, and we got the wrapper. me drag this down a little so you can see it. Okay, we got content and widgets. Well, that's what I want to change. I want to make the content so it's white. So I'm going to say content's right here. I'm going to say background, white. And again, this is not perfect, so don't worry about it. We're going to fix that. Copy that. Paste this in at the bottom of our style sheet. And again, I'm going to remove that margin bottom because I didn't affect that right now. I'm only dealing with the color. Next thing we got to do is I am going to turn off this reply thing for a moment because it's distracting me. So inside of the WordPress page, when I edit it, I have an option. When I scroll down, I can turn off the comments. So let's do that. Let's go to screen options, turn on all the potential meta boxes. And then there's one here for comments. I'm going to turn those off under discussion. And that will allow me to see the page sort of unimpeded by the reply box for the moment. Okay, so let's go ahead and make sure that we have our content that's applying. Reload, see if that's stuck. Okay, it did stick, but you know, I don't have any content on this page, so it's really kind of hard also to see what's going on with the layout. So let's just do this. Let's borrow their sample stuff here. Okay. I'm just going to say view selection source. That went super jumbo, probably went off the video. And I'm just going to borrow this content. Hopefully it'll kind of work to give me some similarity in the page. Edit it. It's always a good idea when you're doing layout stuff to remember that designing a web page is like designing interiors of a house. By the way, I got to be in the text editor to paste code. Okay. If you have a contemporary house that's all white inside, it's going to be almost impossible to get the feeling of it because when it's all white inside, you don't see the paintings or the artwork or the plants and all the things that make it really pop. Same here. Not only can we not know what the content will look like because there's nothing to fill it up, but it just doesn't have the colors or the other things. So now that we put a little sample stuff in, well, we're obviously missing some things like padding, right? So we need padding, and I'm guessing it's about a 20 pixel padding around there. It might be also a percentage. So let's see if we can get a gauge from here. And the padding on the post is actually, top is 1 pixel, sides are 25, and the bottom is 20. So let's just borrow that directly. We're going to do the same thing here. So inspect it. We're going to find the content area, and then we're going to look inside. And actually, we've got the same thing. We've got a post class inside, or an ID inside. And I could see here that there's nothing else that's currently identified or that's defined for the post. The thing that I need is actually this class right here, which is hEntry. Now, I could apply it to the content, but my concern is if I apply it to the content, let's see what happens. It's going to bump things out. So I got to think about this for a second. If I do that, I'll probably just, well, you know, that'll actually work. What I'm going to do is I'll apply it there to the content, and then we'll adjust the sidebar so that it doesn't fall off the side. So had to make a call on the fly there. Save that. And now what we've got is a little bit of an issue where the sidebar sort of fell off the right side and wrapped below. So how do we fix that? Well, let's identify the sidebar. And it's called widgets in this case. And it's got a particular grid width of 31.9%. And that's the way to do this responsively. If I just come down on this to 30, maybe 29, 28, 27, 26, it comes off as filling and working at 25. But that doesn't really look like our design. It looks a little too thin. So we got to think about this for a second. And the thing to do is go back to the mockup and see what they did on the total widths. So they've got the main width is 78%. And they've got the sidebar at, let's see, a fixed width of 340 pixels. That's interesting. I don't know if that's going to work as well with the responsive design, but what we can do is try to cheat it a little bit, try to get the same general dimensions. And one of the other issues here is that I think by putting the sidebar as a fixed pixel width, they effectively have it that the main layout pushes on a percentage, but then it all shrinks to the left and the sidebar doesn't. So I'm going to try it. I've never done that here with this responsive layout, but I'm going to try it just to see as an experiment. So we got the same situation here. We've got the column 300 defining the width of the sidebar. That's not going to work so well, because if we did that, then everything that uses that class of column 300 is going to be affected. So instead, I've got to affect the division ID called widgets. So what I'm going to do here is say widgets. Let me move that up. Widgets with 340 pixels. This is totally experimental. I've never done this with this design before. So it kind of fell off the cliff there, right? So let's see if I bring the width of the layout, the content area down, if I can dial that in a bit. I can make it happen. I'm not so sure that that's really representing the design so well, though. So I gotta be a little clever here. And let me see what happens when on this original design I manipulate the width of the browser. Well, I do see what's happening is that there's a breakpoint here where the sidebar also falls off. But at a certain point, which looks like it's about 860 pixels, and I'm looking at this down in my browser window, the sidebar is there and the content is a little smaller. And the sidebar, as we know, stretches out, and then eventually it pops. So in this case, I'm going to go with an audible, which is football terms for I'm going to go ahead and fake this. And my concern is that, you see, the way that the rest of this responsive theme works is that it won't collapse the right way. So I'm going to stick with the native layout here. And let me do this to get this right to the right video size. I'm going to stick with the native layout here so that in the end, I don't break other stuff. And I think it will fairly represent the design, but it might not be 100% the functionality as laid out originally. We can always tweak that later. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of this widgets area being the 340, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I'm going to adjust the percentages. So actually, let me do this. I'm going to reload this, and I'm going to take that off. Sorry, reload this again. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is instead, I'm going to adjust these to get the feeling of it. And I'm going to start by, I'm going to take a little bit off of there, maybe 2 clicks off, and I'm going to take maybe 2 clicks off of here. Okay, kicked in there. I'm going to go up 2 clicks. I'm going to go back down 2 clicks here. And basically just kind of like taking off the left, taking off the right. Okay, so where I ended up was 61.95 for the main content, and I ended up with 29.1 for the sidebar. And although that may not be perfect right now, that's enough to get me sort of in the ballpark. So let's go with that for now, because it is kind of getting late and this video is getting long. And I want you guys to feel like you got something out of this as an intro. Oops, I copied the wrong thing. I need to copy this. Remember we had that problem where we have to be very selective. I need to override the content, but not the grid class of column 620. So I'm going to just take this percentage, and I'm going to manually apply it to the content. Okay. And I'm going to do the same for the widgets area where the percentage is normally applying to the class of column 300, but I'm going to instead manually apply that to the widgets division. Let's save this, take a look, see if it sticks. And it does. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up, but maybe let's do two last things that I see that are bugging me. First of all, I see how there's a space up here, but there's not a space there. That's easily corrected. So we inspect that, and we see that the wrapper has a margin of 20 at the top for the home wrapper. So we're going to go ahead and say none for that. And in fact, we're going to override it because it's not just going to be for the body class home. We're going to say for all wrapper. we're going to say margin 0 auto. So wrapper, margin 0 auto. Double check that. See, that didn't work. So we're going to have to either override that or we're going to have to change it. For right now, let me double check why that didn't affect. Probably it didn't affect it because we got this more specific home wrapper. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually use the .home wrapper for now. And if on another page we have an issue with it, we'll deal with it then. Probably, though, we're going to have to go ahead and make a secondary rule, which is saying body home wrapper, body class of home wrapper, and also regular wrapper. So I'll save that for now. And the next thing is, just for the moment, you can see that the sidebar stuff has these borders around it and the background color. And I'm going to get rid of that too. So the widgets themselves, if we go over here, we got to search this down, but here, widget wrapper. And there's a background color, but we're going to say none. Border, we're going to say 0 pixel. We're going to say border radius 0. And actually, I want to be proper. Whenever you're not putting any value in, it should just be 0. It shouldn't really be with a pixel. Margin, that's interesting because it's a top, right, bottom. Well, this actually gives us some spacing in there, so I'm going to leave that alone at 20 for the moment. And the same thing with padding. You know, we may play with this, but I'm going to leave it at 20 for right now. But we've gotten rid of the background stuff. And I'm going to place this in. And so, when I save it, for this part of our introduction of making this happen, we are so close to having a cool thing. Wait, I see something in there that I might not have caught. I'm seeing some color. Yep. Didn't get rid of the background color, so I'm going to say none. Or actually, I should say background color transparent. Remember, if the underlying parent theme has an attribute, we have to put something in to override it. So let's just paste that in. Okay, reload it. And you know what? I keep just bouncing back and forth. Hold on one second. Let's do it like this. Background, color, transparent. Save that. Let's see if that did it. Okay. It bugs me that we got the wrong color, so I'm going to do one last thing just for now. Change the primary AH reference color to whatever they're using here. And that happens to be F58220. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to inspect this, and I know we've got the main color here. Change that. I feel better. Okay, I can sleep tonight. Copy the rule definition. And again, we'll organize this in the end to show you how it works, but I save it, reload, and I tell you what, folks, this has been a really, really nice little video to get us started. We're not done, but I think we're going to continue from here, and you can see we're really making some progress, right? Look at that. Responsive, you could hardly recognize it anymore. Don't worry, we're going to get even closer in the next video. If you have any questions, drop on by and give me your comments, questions, concerns, your dreams, your wishes, your fantasies. This is Spence, the evil genius. We'll see you next time.